Just give everyone a minute to get in. All right. Welcome. Hello, I'm Quinn Heath, and I'm the moderator for tonight's event. This is a community outreach meeting for a proposed marijuana cultivator that's going to be Country Club Ventures, LLC, and it's proposed to be located at 446 Country Club Road, Suite A in Greenfield, Massachusetts. So we have with us tonight both Jeff and Blake from the company, from the proposed establishment. We're going to open with a presentation that covers some details about the establishment, and then after that, we're going to move into a public comment question section. So with that, I'll turn it over to Blake. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Quinn. Good evening to everyone in attendance. As Quinn outlined, this is a community outreach meeting, and I just want to emphasize that this is a meeting that's required by state regulation. The Cannabis Control Commission requires this as part of their process. This meeting in and of itself has not one thing to do with the local permitting that is required. So I had a couple of abutters reach out and expressed interest in sort of saying, hey, why are we hearing about this now? So this is the first of many discussions, and it's intended to be the opening of a dialogue. So yeah, the list of things we must cover today, again, is covered by state regulation. So I'll just jump right in, and then we'll have a period of time for questions at the end. So yeah, the first item we have to discuss is that this is a proposed Tier 11 outdoor cultivator proposed for 446 Country Club Ventures, Suite A. The applicant here is Country Club Ventures, LLC. You can guess where the name came from. So the next required topic has to do with
Hey, Dad.
Geneva, thank you. I'm in a meeting. Sorry, that's my daughter. So yes, excuse me one second. Just unexpected visitors, excuse me. So yes, the second topic that we're required to cover has to do with maintaining the location securely. So the Cannabis Control Commission regulations at 935 CMR 500.110 dictate what a cannabis operation must do in terms of security. So the sort of first line of defense against any sort of criminal activity on the site would be detailed camera coverage of the whole facility. This is going to be outdoor, so the facility will consist of a few small buildings for administrative offices to house the security recording infrastructure. And those regulations that I cited, again, 935 CMR 500.110, dictate that the cameras must be full 1080p, which is high definition. Each frame of that footage must be sort of freezable and then, legible so you can identify someone. So each frame will have an irremovable date, time, location, watermark on that. And the state's Cannabis Control Commission requires that Country Club Ventures store that footage for a minimum of 90 days. So that is basically every inch of the property that has plants, which will be enclosed in a fence, will have video camera coverage 24/7, 365. These video cameras will not be directed on anyone else's property. These will be directed only where the fence line will be. The fence is another component of the security. This will be dictated in terms of its construction by the municipality, by Greenfield, during the special permit process and potentially the site plan review process as well. So the actual material of the fence construction is a to be determined item that would be, benefit from input by community members. And I will just make one other point relating to the fence. State law requires that plants not be visible from the road, basically a public way, without the aid of things like a binocular or telescope. So this is not something that'll be, right up against the street line. It will be set back a ways. In addition to the sort of physical security, everyone who works at the facility, at the property, will be background checked, fingerprinted, and has to carry a marijuana establishment agent card, which is issued by the state's Cannabis Control Commission. And that actually segues nicely into the next topic that we have to cover. This operation has to have a plan in place to prevent diversion to minors. In other words, anyone who's under 21 cannot get into this property. And the sort of example I like to use here is that say a Greenfield police officer were showing up and he or she happened to be 20 years old. Their badge wouldn't trump state law. They could not be admitted onto the facility grounds, basically anywhere where there is cannabis. So just going back a half step on the security, any finished product, which would be saleable to other licensed cultivators, obviously retailers or manufacturers, would have to be stored in a highly secured vault area. And that involves, again, the camera coverage, commercial grade locks, and essentially beefing up the walls of the space where that's held, so someone can't just sort of kick in the door and get in for obvious reasons. So yeah, to prevent diversion of minors, that's the first line of defense. You have to be 21 to get on the property at all. You also have to be an employee, a state inspector, a local inspector, fire department, police, that sort of thing, to come to this property. And you also have to abide by the Cannabis Control Commission's visitor procedures. So there's a log of who's coming when and for what purpose. The only other people who would be showing up would be potentially wholesale customers of this cultivation operation. So yeah, the other component that helps prevent diversion to minors is the state has a mandatory seed to sale tracking requirement. That system is called METRC, METRC, as the name implies. A seed obviously is where you start usually, and that has a unique alphanumeric code attached to each plant and to each product that ever leaves the facility. So what I advise my clients to do in their wholesale contracts is to say, okay, my unique code, we're going to know where that ended up. And if they were selling finished flower to a retailer and that number, ended up in the hand of a minor, our contracts would say, it's not just put the blinders on and we don't, it's once we've sold it, it's not their problem anymore. They would have the opportunity to terminate that contract. And frankly, the retailer who had their products, ending up in the hands of minors wouldn't be long for the licensed group at all. The commission takes that really, really seriously, as do I. So as you saw, I have 2 small children. So it's incumbent upon adults to keep cannabis products away. And that starts from the cultivator, right? So we need to understand who the products end up with. If it ends up in the hand of minors, there's, as I said, a look back provision to say that's not going to fly because it would jeopardize Country Club Ventures license with the state as well. The next required topic has to do with sort of similarly related concepts. One is a positive impact plan with capital letters. That is a plan that's intended to benefit one of the citizenries of the 29 areas of disproportionate impact that the Cannabis Control Commission identified. Basically, what that means is a statistical analysis was done and the state identified zip codes and sub-neighborhoods where people got sort of enhanced enforcement against them, disproportionate. So if you look at statistics, you'll see that people of color and Caucasian people consume cannabis at virtually identical rates. The rate of arrest and the severity of convictions is much more significant for people of color. So part of the promise and sort of, one of the things that got questioned for across the finish line in 2016 was that licensed operators would have to try to give back and try to undo some of the wrongs of the failed drug war. So what we've discussed on the state side would be an annual donation to an entity called a nonprofit called the New England Veterans Alliance. As the name implies, they do work to help veterans. Because of the federal prohibition, you can't just get cannabis recommended by the Veterans Affairs Administration, for instance. But there are some real benefits that veterans have seen. So what New England Veterans Alliance tends to do is a lot of sort of cultivation related education for people in disproportionate impact areas. Lowercase sort of positive impact to Greenfield itself, that's really something that we want to have a dialogue with the community. We don't want to say, oh, hey, here's where the charitable dollars or volunteer hours would do the most good. We would try to identify things that would actually move the needle, so it's a net positive. So some of the things my clients have done have been, turkey drives at Thanksgiving, park cleanups, that kind of thing. And that's really something that if anyone does have any suggestions, we would be open to hear. We do have the principal here, Jeff Goodman, and I know he'd be willing to hear those questions or suggestions as well. So the next required topic has to do with presenting information adequate to demonstrate that the location will not constitute a nuisance as that term is defined by law. So what I always like to emphasize is that any state license, any local permit, any host community agreement, none of those pieces of paper is a get out of jail free card. None of it is a license to be not responsive to neighbors and not responsive to legitimate concerns that arise. So with an outdoor cultivation, I think that the chief potential that folks may be concerned about is odor. The reality is, just given our climate, there's really basically one growing season for this plant as being a tropical plant natively. And the sort of benefit of it being in the environment is that the smell does not get concentrated the way it would if this were a giant warehouse grow. So yeah, the strategies used to contain odor are clearly different for outdoor growers than an indoor grower. The strategies I've seen employed involve, first and foremost, the placement of any cultivation space that'll be outdoor, trying to keep it as far away from any property line, as well as, taking a measure of what the prevailing winds might be, on the site. So that's one tool to try to minimize potential odors. The other is companion plantings sort of around the perimeter, native species of plants that might have an odor that could help, counteract any of the cannabis odor that might be generated. And that would be, an obligation that's incumbent upon any licensee as a function of being licensed. So the state's Cannabis Control Commission says you can't be a nuisance and you can't have odor that's basically oppressive. So that's a commitment there. The irony to me as an attorney is just that if this were a proposed hemp farm where it's the same plant, the only difference is the regulatory level of THC in it, there would be unfortunately no obligation whatsoever for a hemp cultivator to care about odor. So I grew up in a relatively agricultural community and had an aunt and uncle who were farmers. So farmland tends to have some smells that folks may not love. With cannabis, the odor production really happens towards the very end. It's not a day one odor. It's as the plant matures. And yeah, that's really the chief potential for nuisance here. Plants growing outdoors don't have any odor issues. Any lighting on the site would be, in keeping with, the security obligations, but the commission has allowed motion detected activated lights. So it's not going to be a floodlight. And really, there's no benefit for an operator to have lights, constantly on the plant. And essentially, with an outdoor, it's a photosensitive plant, meaning it changes the structure of the plant itself based on how many hours of daylight and darkness it receives each day. So as you get closer to fall, the October is about the time the outdoor crops are cultivated in Massachusetts. It would be sort of detrimental to the plant's growth to have giant spotlights. So that's not baked into the proposal. It's not something we want. We don't want the light pollution. And yeah, those are the sort of chief potential concerns for nuisance. And once again, no license, no permit, no host community agreement. None of that is a pathway to just say, well, we're licensed, it's legal. Please don't raise any concerns. So yeah, I'm certain that Jeff is ready to accept any communications from anyone. I think the commitment here is to be a good neighbor and be in full compliance with the state's regulatory structure as well. Any special conditions placed on a special permit that Greenfield may issue. And the final point I'll make just on that is, again, this meeting is a preliminary meeting, right? I had someone ask me, is this a done deal? The answer is no. We have many more months of process, both on the local front and the state front. And there will be public hearings for a site plan review and a special permit. where anyone can voice their concerns as a citizen. And typically planning boards and zoning boards of appeals are sensitive to that. And again, the commitment is to be a great neighbor. So with that, I have covered all of the topics that the Cannabis Control Commission regulations dictate. And I imagine folks have questions, and I'm happy to turn it back to Quinn now.
Yeah, thank you, Blake. So we're going to move into the public comment and question portion of this meeting. If you do have a question, you should use the raise hand feature. It's just a button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. If you're attending by dialing in on phone, you can dial in *9 and it'll do the same thing. And I'll call on people in order. I'm not seeing any hands yet. Does any,
Hello?
the 413 number.
Hello? Oh,
1 sec. 413-773.
we,
Hello?
Hello, go ahead.
Oh, hi. I got a couple of questions. Who owns Country Club Ventures LLC?
It is a single member LLC, and the only owner is a gentleman named Jeff Goodman, and he is on this meeting tonight.
Okay. And are you considering other sites too in Greenfield?
No, this is the target property. Basically, every step in the journey has to be tied to a single property. So yeah, it'll be 446 Country Club Ventures, Suite A, which is a designation by the USPS to say that this is the where mail gets delivered.
Okay. All right. Do you know that this is family developments are up here?
Yeah, I was
this-
made aware of that. Yeah, basically what you do when you look for property that is sort of permits cannabis is you have to look at the zoning ordinance and you have to look at the zoning bylaw. So the city of Greenfield, drew on the map places where this use is allowed, and this property is in that zone.
Right, but since then, developments have gone in up here, with many young children. A brand new development went up right next door to this, with probably I'm going to say 50 or 60 houses in it. Are you aware of that?
I am truthfully geographically challenged, but I can tell you that again, there's no permissible entry by a child. The product itself, you can't be.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the next thing is, you grow the plants, and then there a wholesaler buys the seeds from you.
No, it would be the sale of dried and cured flower, which is basically the bud of the plant. And they would be eligible to sell that to a retail store, a manufacturer who would basically turn that product into something else, or they could conceivably sell seeds to another cultivator, but that's not a huge portion of the industry here.
Okay, so your wholesalers, are they buying like the quantities that you would put in a bag or a car or a truck or a van or a trailer truck?
It would be basically Sprinter van, so like a plumber's truck or an electrician's truck, so not an 18-wheeler.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, because I had a question, because if it's anything large, you have a very low underpass that you're dealing with. Very low underpass.
Van sized. Yep.
Oh, okay. All right. And so you've presented this to the town, and then the next step is beside letting the neighborhood know what's going on, that the town of Greenfield is going to have meetings on this?
Yes, so we'll have to apply for the local permits. The entity does have what's known as a host community agreement with the city of Greenfield. That's a state requirement. To get to opening day, the city of Greenfield needs to respond to the Cannabis Control Commission and say, to get to final open day, that all the local permitting requirements have been adhered to. So that would be a certificate of occupancy, a special permit, likely a site plan review, and those do all come with public hearings. So again, I just do want to emphasize this is the first of many meetings. If everything went swimmingly well and sort of fast by government standards, this facility, would be open, probably not in time for this year's grow season. That's the hope. There is a little bit of a speed preference to the state review for outdoor cultivators to help try to achieve the Global Warming Solutions Act goals. But we'll have to see. The typical timeline is about 12 to 18 months from day one to opening day. So yeah, we're in maybe 3. So yes, many more months of process.
Okay, I follow you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Barb Wozniak.
What did this, you mentioned a couple buildings. How big are those? Where are they located?
Yeah, so the buildings, the plans will be submitted along with the special permit and site plan review. These aren't going to be, Amazon warehouse style buildings. I would say, the size of a small barn. Basically, the plan hasn't been drawn yet. We have to determine, what will fit. There's some wetlands on the property that we have to be cognizant of. But yeah, I would call it sort of a head house administrative office. I would guess if the building itself was, 5,000 square feet, that would be surprising to me. But yeah, that will be all, developed through the permitting process. I don't have a good answer. I don't know if Jeff, you have an idea of what size buildings will be off the top of your head, but if you do, feel free to chime in.
You gave a good answer. It will not be larger than a large barn, certainly not larger than a 2-story building in height.
How is it accessed? How close is it to Country Club Road? And how is it accessed off Country Club Road to that building?
It is on Country Club Road. Yeah. So
how far from the street to where the building is located?
We don't yet know the exact location. It will be not right on the street. As I said, the Cannabis Control Commission regulations dictate you can't see plants from the road. So I have not been to the site, but my understanding is that it's a decent chunk of acreage. So I think, again, to be sensitive to neighbors, we're going to try to put it, as dead center as you can. And it will be accessible, via a driveway.
How many employees are going to be employed on site?
Jeff, do you have a good answer for that one? I don't know.
Yeah, so throughout the season, there will be less than 5 full-time. And then during busy periods such as planting and harvest, it may require up to 15, maybe 20 at most for a period of a few weeks. That's on the high side, but no more than 5 in an ongoing period.
Where will those vehicles be parked when they're there?
Well, there's currently a driveway that goes into the property. And so that driveway, as it sits, has a place for several vehicles to park. So it would be they would not be parked on the street, for example. They would be parked off the street on the driveway.
So that existing driveway into the facility is adequate to handle whatever traffic, whether it's employees or, production vehicles coming in and out of there?
The complete answer to that is once we have the full engineering design, which we'll have to obviously submit to the town, we'll make the final decision on that to make sure that it is sufficient, that we're not disrupting the town and that we can accommodate the needs.
Now, is the plant's going to be processed inside this facility? Is there going to be odor coming out of that facility after they've harvested and put in there?
So the building itself will have climate controls on it. And what indoor growers do to control odor is they put carbon filtration systems basically on any sort of outflow pipe of air. So yeah, that will be periodically changed, and that is, the industry standard. The product as it's drying and curing, that I would say is the sort of height of its potential for odor. So you'll have the added benefit there of that being internal. So you'll have the buffer of the walls, of the exterior of the building. And then what most cultivators do is they build rooms within a room, so you can control that microclimate because the humidity is crucial to the dry and the cure. So yeah, any air that leaves that building will have already gone through the carbon filtration system.
The other question, is, do you indicate there's gonna be a fence around it? How high would that fence be?
That would be the subject of the special permit. The commission's regulations basically say, it can't be a 3-foot fence for the obvious sort of ease of scalability. But we're not talking a 15-foot. I would say 6 to 8 would be a good estimate.
So how much of the field you indicate, is there gonna be 5 acres, 10 acres? I mean, that's a big field out there.
Yeah, so what the Cannabis Control Commission does is by, they break up cultivation by tiers. So the most you can grow is 100,000 square feet. And that's the tier 11 that Country Club Ventures is applying for. So that's 2 and a little bit.
All right, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks. Nancy's iPad. Nancy, you should have a button to appear to unmute. All right. Oh, there we go.
Her hand is raised.
All right, we can hear you. Sorry, I think you muted yourself, Nancy. There you go.
Yeah, I think our question was answered.
All right. Veronica?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I am actually a neighbor. I'm actually not a neighbor. I live directly across from the field. I'm at 531 Country Club Road. We've lived here since 2007, and I have 2 young children. So obviously my interest in this is very piqued. And I have a lot of concerns. So my main concern is both of my children are special needs. And so obviously I think about them and their health and their care. And it started off, this whole meeting started off, and I put it in quotes, but I don't know if I quoted it properly. It says to reduce criminal activity within the area. Right now, we don't have criminal activity. Our biggest worries are wildlife, like the deer, the bears, the foxes, that sort of thing. We've never had to think about what's going on across the street from us and how that's going to impact our life as far as criminal activity. And then when we bought this house, we were sold with the idea that no buildings were going to be erected across the street from us. It was all agricultural. There would nothing be built. Your neighbors are who are next to you and behind you. So obviously this is changing what we bought 15 years ago. And that's not what we bought into. We didn't buy into buildings being built up across the street from us or marijuana being planted across the street from us. So obviously, and I'm not the only resident with this sort of concern, but it's not what I bought into when I bought my home. And I have concerns now that I have children. And I worry about the noise control, obviously, like there's going to be a lot more traffic. We bought this house because of where it was located.
I'm sorry, is this just a comment or do you have a question there? Sorry.
It's a concern of being a homeowner where I'm located directly across from the field. I have legitimate concerns. And how are all these concerns going to be addressed? Because they're very real.
Sure. So I will tell you, obviously 15 years ago when you bought the property, cannabis was not legal at the state level. So, I frankly wouldn't have predicted that, 15 years ago. But that's the result of question 4. And the reality is the rules applicable to this kind of operation are more stringent than basically any industry in this state other than nuclear power generation facilities. So the legality, is a sort of function of democracy, right? That's what the majority of question 4 voters said. And then what Greenfield did is they have the legislative power to create zoning. So what zoning does, and just for background, I used to be a municipal attorney, so I've actually written zoning bylaws. Basically what it does is it looks at the map and tries to group uses of a property together. So you wouldn't want, a slaughterhouse next to a daycare, right? For obvious reasons. So what the state regulations require is a buffer between cannabis facilities and schools, and municipalities have the power, A, to set the map where these facilities can go, and B, to set different buffers that they so choose. So when a client comes to me and says, what about this property? My job is to say, is there a legal pathway to getting there? And to be clear, there's still local permitting. So all the concerns you raised is addressable in a public hearing context. So I'm just getting the note that we're up against the time here. So yeah, as you all received the same notices, these are 3 separate proposals for the same property. What we've done is, because they're different entities, is we have different Zoom invites. And I know it's a pain, but what I'd like to do is switch to the next meeting, just so it's in the right lane. These questions, I imagine, would be the same, and hopefully it's not too much trouble to ask everyone to log in. I believe Quinn is posting the Zoom link to the next meeting. So if it's permissible to switch over to that one, I'll continue answering those questions. Again, it'll just be through the lens of a slightly different entity here.
So as Blake said, we scheduled this meeting for half an hour. There is another meeting related to this property happening immediately after this. I just sent that link in the chat. So if you click that now, you'll jump into the next meeting and you'll get let in just a moment.
And just before we do end this, Quinn, can you just jot down the folks who haven't had the chance to ask the questions yet, so we can make sure we get to them in the next meeting?
Yep, give me one moment.
Okay.
I have a dial-in number. Is there any way you can help me with that?
Sure. Hold on one second. Okay. I'll put it in the chat, but I'll also tell you, this will be 929-205-6099. And the meeting ID is 817-3822-5776.
Thank you very much.